Hello, everybody. Come on, come on. This is a panel discussion. This should be excited. Still no excitement. Oh, well, we'll try and do better. Can I ask the panel members, please, to come up? You know who you are, I hope. Come on, a big hand for everybody. Where are you sitting? Yeah, I'll sit over. Okay, so while we get organised, so we're here to talk about cyber opportunities, a fairly broad topic. But before we begin, a bit of context. I want to put this in a geopolitical context, given the election that's about to play out in the next 24 to 48 hours, and talk about what's going on in the world today. So very briefly, the US was the only superpower for the last 10 years. Let's literally say that. Now that's more uncertain than ever. We've got China challenging the US in the South China Sea. We've got Russia challenging the US through its proxy in NATO. We've got globalization at a mammoth scale. And within this environment, we've got cybersecurity, the fifth form of attack or defense happening. And our panel today, we're going to talk about a wide range of topics, including the election, but also about cybersecurity. So without further ado, introductions. First of all, to my left, Chris Mohan from Telstra. Wave at the crowd, please. Hello. Yes. So Chris is General Manager of Security Controls, and I've wondered what that meant. It's actually threat intelligence, so a really exciting area. And he's been involved with a wide variety of roles in Fortune 500 companies, both in the trenches as well as executive level. We have Adi Ashkenazi sitting in the middle there.
Thank you. Brought her from home.
Okay, fantastic. Well, at least you have your own supporters. So Adi Ashkenazi is VP for Product and XM Cyber, a very interesting company, which has some really interesting people that are part of it, including ex-Mossad directors. He works as Deputy Director in R&D for cybersecurity in the PM's office, so a very illustrious career. And of course, our last speaker, Barak, who we all know. Big clap, come on, I've got to make this exciting. And I think we've already heard enough from Barak, so we won't take up the panel's time. And next, Andre. Hands up. So Andre's here representing Avantgarde, an Aussie startup that deals in tailored cyber solutions. Very, very interesting, and obviously is a founder for Sydney Ventures and has invested in several early stage startups. And last but not least, we have, I think I've introduced everybody. Oh, sorry. Yes, Natan, who we've heard from before as well, so I won't introduce him again. So, let's see what we can do. And guys, we want controversy in this panel. It's been all pretty tame to date. So I want you to think about some controversial questions. I'm going to start with some tame ones and then move to some more controversial ones, but controversial. We'll have audience time at the end. So first question, Chris. Hello. How are you doing?
Not too bad.
Can we have the mic put over here, please, just so people can hear? So the first question is, the three key trends in cybersecurity that Telstra's focused on the next 3 years, and how does your ventures team, which there are 2 members here at the back there, strategy complement it?
Okay, so nice and simple. So Barak, thank you very much. Basically, he's going to keep me employed for probably the next 15 to 20 years. Brilliant. Just looking after that. Most of my day job is protecting Telstra's customers and staff's privacy and security. So we're trying to look over the horizon and deal with the problems of today. So my first big problem is dealing with the dumb. We've got too many technologies and too many gizmos, and there's no automation. So automation is an absolute priority for us to make sure we can do that at speed and at scale to deal with the threats that are coming at us. And we're just seeing, dealing with missiles, for goodness sake, and sensors picking those up. We see attacks every second of every day. So dealing with that is absolutely crucial, but doing it so our people can deal with the smart stuff, not the dumb stuff that we see day in, day out, because that wastes everybody's time. That's why there's a skill shortage. We're trying to fix every single little thing that hops up and down very quickly. Second thing is, we've done a great job identifying the known threats. We need to start worrying about the anomalies, the unknown unknowns, as the Americans love to call them at this stage. Why is that? Because they're unclassified business risks. Cybersecurity, tragically for me, is me being a risk manager and telling my business what risks are out there. They make the decision in it, not me. So we need to know about anomalies. Third, and this is the dream, is self-aware data. The biggest problem you see in all the breaches at the moment is data walks out of your building on its own. It doesn't know where it goes, it doesn't know where it lives, it doesn't know what it does. And it opens up and you've got access to, and if you're a Tesco customer, you've got access to all their bank details, which is bad. So what you want to do is make sure that data works out. It shouldn't be there in the first place. It shouldn't be leaving the building. It shouldn't be leaving the system. So smart data that knows where it is and what it's doing is the nirvana, because that means I can go home at night and not answer my phone. Now, working with all the innovation teams and our venture capital teams, really, is to look at these companies that come up with these solutions. Because the IT industry and the security industry do a god-awful job. We do 1.1, 1.2, 1.3. We don't make these huge innovative leaps. We're trying to fix the same sort of problems day in, day out. And we stick next gen on top of it, which is awesome. A shinier box with go faster stripes on it. That doesn't actually bring us security outcomes. All it does is bring us a new solution, a new box, and a new set of vendors that are going to be paying more money too. So we want to come with some really smart outcomes. So talking to those guys and girls over there, say, hey, what else is taking us in a different horizon from what we're looking at the moment? Done.
Excellent. And kept to time too. Thank you. Okay. Next. Natan, a very fascinating presentation on the Internet of Things and its applicability in life and death. But, you know, it's been around a while, but yet widespread enterprise adoption is fairly low, as is consumer adoption. So my question to you is, why do you think that is? And is it related at all to cyber in the sense that people are afraid to hook themselves up to these sensors, which nobody knows anything about?
Well, the way that I see it is everything is going to be connected. Every sensor is going to communicate. And we have been using to deal with antiviruses, firewalls, and so on. We cannot put antivirus in every sensor. The sensors become smarter. They carry on CPUs. They are not under control of the system administrator. So we are facing thousands in every organization, thousands of sensors that are eligible to be attacked from the cyber point of view. So many companies are trying to deal with SCADA, cybersecurity, and those kind of things. But if you look at the IoT, to try to deal with those kind of sensors, to protect from them, it's going to be even more complicated. If you look at our watering system, for example, we have many sensors all around Israel, just to make sure that no one is poisoning our waters. Now, those sensors can be the start of the cyber attack itself. If you look at the Iron Dome, for example, one of our concern was that once we fire an interceptor to the air and we have to transmit to it and so on, maybe would something take over this interceptor. So we have been used to deal with this kind of challenges. The IoT challenge make it even worse because you cannot put a firewall on each sensor transacting, giving you a lot of information in high speed. So we'll have to deal with that. There are many ways to deal with it. I'm not trying to frighten no one, but it's a new challenge with the IoT business. Everything is going to be connected. We better get used to it, and we better think about how to protect from that.
Excellent. Really interesting perspective. But I wonder, how do we get people to accept that reality? Or is it just going to be pushed on them?
Well, I think the competition will make whatever is needed because no one can handle this business the way that we used to, just with Excel and those kind of things in offline. Everything should be online. The efficiency become very important. You know, we have a monopoly. We had a monopoly in Israeli electrical company, but there is no monopoly anymore because us, the customer, won't satisfy and so on. So all those ones that are frightened from the technology might find out that they are losing the business anyway. So they better move in and protect themselves.
Great. Thank you. Adi, a question for you.
Do you want to get that?
Yeah, thanks.
Sure.
So, the top 3 cybersecurity concerns for Australia, and given your background in government, if there was one policy that you could implement or that you could change, given your understanding of Australia, what would that be?
Okay. Well, first of all, I'm not an expert in Australia, but I'll do my best from my perspective. I think the first thing to note is that in the cyber dimension, Australia is equal to any other country in the world, which is a first, actually. Because in the physical dimension, Australia has historically been defended by vast oceans with great white sharks and box jellyfish and all kinds of abominations that can kill you in like 2 seconds, right? And that's not really the case. It seems trivial, but it's not that trivial, because that means that every other cyber entity in the world can reach Australia at the speed of light, basically. So it's Team Australia versus Team World. Now, back to your question, my problem is, or Australia's problem, I think, today is Team Australia. Team Australia is a bit small today, I think. People call it the skill gap, right? Skill shortage, skill gap, and things like that. And I think, you could probably adapt some of the mechanisms we devised in Israel for that skill gap. And I think there are 3 areas of focus. That's the education, the government sector, and then there's the private sector. Now, education has been introduced before me, but I actually, as part of my job, actually recruited those 18-year-old whizzes, and I could see, the programs that the Israeli government funded, and there are tons of those in the high schools and out of the high schools, actually. I could see those kids coming from, being just smart to being smart and having a vast amount of knowledge by the time they're 18 and by the time they're joining the army, which is phenomenal. So if this kind of education can be injected into the high school system in Australia and the universities, that would be great. The second thing is government. Now, in Israel, we have the army. That's like the biggest investor in Israel, really. It's not the VCs, it's not the government, it's the army. The army is the biggest investor in talent and in cybersecurity in Israel. And this doesn't exist to the same extent in Australia. So I would definitely try to build similar mechanisms, maybe government agencies, things like that, widen them. If there's someone from the Australian government here, he'll be happy to hear that I think they need tons more budget and open positions. But do not fall into the mistake of sucking those talents for life. Set them loose after a few years, throw them back into the private sectors. Like 5 to 7 years, I think, is optimal. And then there's the private sector. Again, I think there needs to be a much bigger investment here in startups, in innovation hubs, within existing large corporations, which Australia has and Israel doesn't, by the way. It's an advantage of Australia. And I think once you have all that thing flowing, you'll have this virtuous cycle that we see in Israel, which is training and new talent all the time.
Interesting. Do you think that Australia lacks awareness, or do you think Australia lacks execution?
A little bit of both, I guess. I mean, Australia is a peaceful nation, which is a great thing. Yeah,
yeah, it is.
Don't get me wrong; it's not good to be with war like from the day you were started. But so Australia is peaceful, and I think there's a lack of awareness. I think Australia is a bit behind in the global cyber arms race, which has been raging for at least 6 years, raging like. So I think lots of awareness, and with awareness, there'll come the execution.
Okay. Thanks, man.
Sure.
So, Andre, as an investor in many companies, I want you to cast your mind 5 years into the future. If there was a topic that's emerging in cybersecurity today, and you could create a company in 5 years' time, what would that topic be, and what would that company do?
So that's actually something that I've done already. So I hope that I invested in the right places. The thing is that the cybersecurity landscape keeps changing literally by the minute. So 5 years from now, it's a good question because it depends on things on where will we be with quantum computing in 5 years, because like this will change the balance of power like all the way. So everything we know today could be irrelevant in 5 years from now if quantum computing will be there. But being a little bit more realistic, I think that in cybersecurity today, you actually need to stop thinking defensively and start thinking offensively. Because unless you're thinking like the guy who's trying to hack into your system, you're just going to keep building taller and thicker walls, but that's not going to stop anyone. I've been in one of the Israeli military units for about 6.5 years, and we used to do things that were so extreme 15 years ago, even more. Then I remember that in 1998, there was a movie called The Enemy of the State with Will Smith, and well, it was a pretty popular movie back then. So we actually had an executive order that we cannot comment on this movie. Now, I'll leave the rest with you of what were the reasons for that, but that was in 98. Wow. So my assumption is, and we're working with fairly large companies because we pretty much provide like the high-end solutions and really the non-conventional products. So my assumption is that everyone is hacked, and the only question is whether you're aware of it or not. So I think thinking offensively and investing in incident response and having like a proper incident response plan and like more broadly cyber resilience.
Excellent. No, thank you. It's interesting because we really have to think about both sides of the equation, don't we? Defensive and offensive. And we traditionally think about defensive. And Barak, interested, as a seed investor, you know, with I guess a new venture capital firm, can you tell us about one or two really interesting Israeli seed ideas that you've heard of in the cybersecurity space?
Sure. So, you know, when you meet teams in Israel, everyone is from 8200 or 8100. I wasn't. I was from the infantry. I was cannon fodder. And so I tend to think the same way. What do I mean by that? Before investing, I operated startup companies in the games space. And I found that, you know, if I could work as a commercial partner with the startup and see that it created value and there was good chemistry with the CEO, then I would invest. I'd kick the tires first, see there's an opportunity, and then invest. Now, another thing I learned during that time is whenever I would invest in a game, I'd lose my money. But if I would invest in something in the ecosystem, whether it be ad technology or big data technology or even IoT technology, it would be a hit. And so what's the takeaway from that? In any gold rush, you want to invest in the shovels, not dig for gold. How do we apply that today? Last week, before I came down here, I was sitting on next to the Hilton Hotel, which is the main business hotel in Tel Aviv, sitting with my wife and my baby, and we were, you know, enjoying the sunset. And a guy next to me was flying a drone, and I saw him, he was looking at his iPad, and he was piloting it to fly up to the windows of the Hilton and go room by room by room and checking what was happening inside those rooms. And then he flew directly out over to the sea and was hovering around a yacht. And nobody knew where the drone is coming from, and for sure nobody could do anything about it, even if they did know where it's coming from. And so I don't know when drones are going to hit. Everyone talks about drones, and how big it's going to be. You know, there aren't too many drone companies other than those who manufacture drones that are actually making money. But I do know that that threat is real, and it's happening today. And if I could sell you anti-drone technology for your home or for your stadium or for your prison, you'll buy it. And so the interesting opportunities in cyber, thinking outside the box, are in domains like that. Anti-drone technology, cyber protection for drones, etc. And you can apply the same logic to other fields. I talked in my speech about cyber insurance and why there's such a huge need there driven by regulation.
Awesome. So let's talk about something a bit more general. Let's talk about cybersecurity and privacy. And there's an interesting conundrum, guys. And that is, as we move to more open source technology, such as blockchain, etc., is it a contradiction that as things become more open, they're actually safer. And perhaps we can start with Natan.
First of all, if Barak, if you are looking for anti-drone system, I have one. So you can look at it on our website. In any case, open software will open the door for viruses and cyber attack. We have to get used to it. There are many means, especially in coming from the defense world, of using on one hand open software, but isolating them from the core capability of the system. But we have to take the risks. The best thing to do is not to use computer at all, going back to the Stone Ages. Then you are fully protected. Managing any company, there is some risk. This is one of the risks that you have to handle. We are not going to avoid them. But every time you open the door for open source, you open the door as well to being attacked by this kind of software. Even in Iron Dome, we are using some of the open sources software, but we have a procedure how we are clearing them to make sure that nothing is going in and so on. But the danger is there, the risk is there, and you have to take the risk.
Interesting. Does anyone else have a different perspective?
Well, I'm a proponent of open source generally. But I think, the danger of open source is the fact that people think that open source equals secure, which is not the case. I've heard a lot of people say, oh, I'm using Linux. There's no malware for Linux. So the good thing about open source is that, if you have an effective community in place, then a lot of people will look at the code and be able to find any kind of bugs. The bad thing is that bad people will be looking at it as well. And they don't have to reverse engineer anything. They have the code in front of them, which makes it much easier to find logical vulnerabilities in your code. In addition to that, there's one more danger of open source, which is a lot of people contribute to open source. Not all of them are good guys. People can actually insert backdoors to open source without other people noticing if they're sophisticated enough. So I'm for it, but you have to understand that it's not necessarily a more secure system.
Can I add something?
Yeah.
Yes. There is another solution that we can help you later on. You can find out with Zalatan.
Great, thank you.
For me, it's kind of simple. Open source means more eyes on the code itself. Closed source code is closed source code. You don't know what you're getting. And if you look at the press in the US, that gives you pause for thought on what's been injected into code you cannot see. So there are swings and roundabouts with everything. You make a risk decision on the code you're buying. For me, one of the bonuses of open source code is that you get innovation from it. People see that and say, hey, I can do that better, or I can change that. Rather when you're looking at, and I'm not knocking Windows, but you look at Microsoft and they say, well, I don't know how they do that. I'll go and invent my own ones, rather than working on basically on the shoulders of other giants. You can use their technologies, understand what they do, and develop it from there. And I think we've got some bright guys and girls in universities all around the world that can take open source and make it a darn sight better than it currently is. Look at a lot of the software that, especially on drones, people are writing their own code now. They know it works and says, well, that's kind of crappy, let's fix it. Make it more secure, make it safer. So I like the idea of open source. You use what you use for the right environment and the right risk.
Great. Anyone else?
Open source is actually being used by hackers as well. You can get ransomware as open source. You can get DDoS as open source. So it plays both ways.
Yeah. Okay, excellent. Barak? No? Okay. Let's see if we can get you first on this one then. So we're dealing with a very interesting, as I spoke at the beginning, about the election coming up. So does a Trump or Clinton presidency, from a cyber perspective, or even a general security perspective, make the world a safer or unsafer place?
Okay, look, what's all the talk about Clinton recently? It's about the email hacks. So that put it on the radar, right? The vulnerabilities, and you can be sure every politician, every business leader is thinking twice before they write something or send it somewhere. So indirectly, it benefited. Now, on the other hand, Trump is one of the most hated individuals to run for public office around the world for a long time. And there are groups like Anonymous who will put the U.S. squarely in its sights if Trump gets elected. So, you know, as I see it, certainly we won't be, as the U.S., more popular on the global stage if Trump is elected. On the other hand, Clinton has already shown certain reckless behavior, so I hope she'll learn from it and introduce some better practices going forward.
Anyone else?
Oh, you know, I think the cyber train is right now at 500 kilometers per hour with no driver. So you can put Trump there, you can put Clinton there. I think this race is going to go forward, whatever you do. And I don't think the world is going to... I think it has to get a little bit worse before it will get a bit better in terms of cybersecurity.
Okay, interesting. Anyone else?
For me, if it was Donald Trump actually writing the cybersecurity policy and implementing it, I'd be very afraid. The same with Hillary. I'm assuming, like a lot of people, they've got smart guys and girls underneath them. They'll be going to their experts. Mr. Trump may have some very strange ideas, and if you read his cybersecurity policy, which is on his website, incidentally, which is hilarious, you know, it's obviously this. He's plucked some words, he's Googled, he's cut and paste, and job done. But if he comes into power, I'm assuming any president of any country will use the smartest people in their countries and around the world to make their policies better. Donald Trump is quoted of buying $3 websites to protect his various things, and we all know they've been owned sideways by various actors on those ones. I'm hoping, fingers crossed, whoever gets into power uses the people around them and the brains around them. Otherwise, we're all stuffed. Anyone got a trip to the moon or Mars that they can sort us now will be good.
Yeah. Anyone else? Nope. Okay, next question. Let's start with Adi on this one, actually. There's been some talk, and it's been in the press most recently, about Israel losing its edge in cybersecurity to the United States. Is this true, first of all, in your opinion? And secondly, how is Israel maintaining its edge if it's not true?
I wouldn't be concerned about the United States. United States has many huge companies that are having development group and development companies in Israel. I would be concerned with the China. If they are going to do to us whatever they've done with the textile and with the manufacturing as a whole, then we are going to be in a big trouble. You can imagine that on every engineer they can put thousands of engineers doing the same thing, and this is what we have to be looking for the next 5 years.
Interesting.
Kind of reminds me of a joke we used to have where I worked. An elephant and a mouse, they go down a dusty road together, and the mouse looks back and tells the elephant, "Look how much dust we're stirring up." And this is Israel and the United States, as I view it. I think they're complementing each other in their cyber advantages, let's say. Israel is like a speedboat. We go fast, we're nimble, we turn quickly. And the US is a giant aircraft carrier, right? It takes a lot of time to turn it around, but once you do, you have a freaking aircraft carrier, right? So I think there's no real competition. I think, also in terms of talent, lots of Israelis are working in the States, and lots of companies from the States are opening hubs in Israel. I think it's one of the most synergetical systems I've ever seen. I would love to have this kind of competition, so to say, with many other countries in the world.
Anyone else?
Just to add, a good example of that is, I talked about Syria before, but there was a better publicized case about Iran, and rumored that the US and Israel collaborated on the Stuxnet virus, which caused the centrifuges to spin out of control. Now, when they analyzed the code, the amount of code that was inserted to do that was 20 times more than a typical hack, and it was flawless, didn't have any bugs. Only a state actor could produce that kind of code, and again, US and Israel rumored to collaborate together. Again, getting back to the investment side, Israel is by far the per capita leader in investment in cybersecurity, so we don't see that edge going anywhere.
Anyone else? Okay, guys, so we've got 10 minutes left. We're hoping for some really exciting questions from you guys. Does anyone have anything? Who's going to be the first? Yes.
There's a lot of exposure given to the Australian Signals Directorate's top 4 mitigations for cyber resilience. I just wonder what the opinion of the panel is have they got their priorities right?
Yeah.
Oh, thank you, sir. So, yes, they have. Because if you look at the very basic things there, it's simple IT hygiene that is killing us by default. If you do what the ASD top 4 does, then 80% of your problems will go away, because the bad guys are like water. They take the path of least resistance. And if you haven't patched a system that's been out there for 4 years, they'll take absolute advantage. The guys here were saying that, you know, people doing military training, they do 101 stuff in school to do this one. There are vulnerabilities that SQL injection are 14 years old. So kids at school know how to do this. They can compromise their school computers. The biggest pain in the backside on the ASD list is the whitelisting piece, because trying to get a piece of code to stay the same as it is hard. But again, everything they've got in there is remarkably sensible to do. And I probably would be a lot happier, my wife would be a lot happier, because I wouldn't be responding to as many calls if people did the basic thing that is said in the tin.
Anyone else?
Is it feasible though?
Yeah, no, it absolutely is. Part of the problem that we face at the moment is there is a lack of this IT hygiene and discipline from those ones. And that's because we haven't got to automation properly. We've got so many piecemeal approaches, it gets very difficult very quickly, because the business risk hasn't been pushed to the business to explain what the actual case is. They think it's an IT problem rather than business risk. And that's it. It really comes down to that. Change the conversation and it fixes it.
Thank you, guys. Any other questions? Come on, I know some people here. I'll have to pick on somebody.
High-level question. What were the possible options for Hillary using that unsecure email address? I know she's apologised for everything, but why would she have done that? It was illegal, but it was not illegal. But I'm just trying to rationally understand why she would have done that.
Laziness.
That's all.
Pure and simple. Because she obviously could work with the Department of, what is it called, Homeland Security. Whatever. She just could work with like the proper server, but you need to open a VPN and establish a connection and download your emails, and so it's a process. Now they are cumbersome tools, but so when you're lazy, just put it on your own server and just access it with an unencrypted connection. So
I have a different take on that. I don't think Hillary Clinton can install a mail server. Seriously. I don't think she can execute an executable on a PC, let alone power one on. So,
Why? Because she's a woman?
no, because she's not a technologist, and I know lots of good technologists who don't know how to install mail servers. And I doubt that she has the time to do so as Secretary of State. And if she does have the time, she's not managing her time correctly. So this must have been done by someone else. I'm not sure she even knew. I'm not trying to defend her, but the notion of Hillary Clinton sitting at home and actually installing them, oh, I don't like this configuration back there, I'll switch the mail server to home. That doesn't make any sense, right? So someone did it for her. Now, if there's a sinister reason behind it, I don't know, it could be laziness. And by the way, it could be another reason. Maybe other people had access to, to a centric mail server somewhere else, and she wanted, and they proposed that it will be somewhere where no one else can read her emails from the government. It could be also compartmentalization within the government. Just my theory.
Anyone else?
Unfortunately, I kind of see similar things every day, and it's not down to laziness, it's down to complexity of security. So if you're going through the security controls, you need to turn a VPN, make sure you're connected to the right bits, and it's all this complexity. If I can just use Google and Google Dropbox to stick something up there, simplicity itself. So, and I see my kids doing it. Why not do what they're doing? And they don't have a mail limit of 100 meg. They've got 50 gigs worth of data. I can stick anything up there. We call it shadow IT. So it's where staff go out and use their credit card to bypass the cumbersome IT systems being put in place that slow them down, restrict them from innovation. And since we're talking about innovation here, security's got to be built in as DNA. It cannot be a bolt-on that goes on that causes extra complexity to a business. Anything that slows down a business will kill the business or be killed. My job as a security guy is to provide security. It's not, we don't work in security. Telstra isn't a security company, but it should be part of our DNA, and I try and help that happen. It's that simple. If Hillary's system had been secure and easy to use, I bet she would have used that. But my guess is the US government system is probably pretty complex. At a guess.
I heard that Obama's iPhone, he uses an iPhone, but he said that it's almost unusable because they've pulled out everything that he likes.
Yeah, that's going to happen. I mean, if the thing is that if that had been my CEO and I annoy him, I'm pretty sure I wouldn't have a job very soon.
Anyone else? No? Another question here?
I just want to contrast, there's a bit of a difference between, I guess, the security posture in Australia to Israel. Obviously, Israel, it's far more existential. That's not to say that the Australian government doesn't see that as pretty important, but I think somebody very smartly commented that we have very large corporates in Australia. And when you look at their cares, it's far more about privacy. I haven't heard much about privacy, and also what do you think in terms of what's happening in, does Israel care about privacy as much as we do? Is there investment in that area? Because here it is a really significant issue.
Well, I think the basic assumption should be that there is no privacy, period, for anyone who's using any sort of electronic communication or device. But having said that, you still want to secure the private data. So in Israel, people care about it, but they kind of value their personal security kind of a few notches higher. And I think in Australia, the problem is that it's not people don't, well, sometimes I think they don't care. So I see a lot of this kind of ostrich strategy, just let's stick our head into the sand and just pretend nothing happens and no one is trying to hack us. But the reality is that Australia is one of the most hacked countries on earth. There are a few reasons to that. One of them, it's simply an English-speaking country. So all the malware that work in the States, UK, Canada, work in Australia, just copy-paste. The other one, there is a lot of money. We all know about the superannuation industry, over 2 trillion, and the big banks and stuff like this. So the reward is pretty significant. And I think that on the government regulatory level, and coming back to what Barak said about the cyber insurance and the regulation, like in Australia, there isn't even a mandatory breach disclosure like there is in the States. So like, not yet. Like they're talking about it, but even then, it already looks like there would be so many exclusions to that it would be pretty much inefficient or ineffective.
Just want to add something, another anecdote. On my way down here, I'm always impressed. I respect the security at the airport in Israel because you don't see guns, you don't see, police, you don't see dogs. It's very subtle. And as I was queuing for the regular X-ray for my bags and going through the machine, there was a guy in another line who clearly was drunk and tried to barge his way to the front of the line, as Israelis do. And out of nowhere, a female security officer stopped him, and then 3 other guys jumped out and took him away, whispered something in his ear, and took care of the threat. So I think in Israel, it's more elegant in the sense that we're not doing mass privacy invasion. Rather, we're using artificial intelligence to identify threats and focusing our efforts in those areas. And therefore, we see interesting technology also in authentication and verification, and happy to expand on that.
I think one of the things that you have to understand about Israel is that there's actually a big defensive problem, I think, and gap in Israel, because there are 300 companies, or startup companies, that are developing innovative technologies, but all the smart guys want to work for those companies. They don't want to do defense. And when I visited lots of the larger corporations in Israel, and actually they're not in that great of a shape. And I think privacy is less of an issue in Israel than in the rest of the say, Western world. But I mean, the one advantage they do have is that they have about, I think, 20 startups on average trying their tools and technologies on their networks, because that's the Israeli DNA. You have a startup here, you have a friend who works in another company. You say, "Can I try my my new agent for security on your machines?" Now, this will never fly with an American or an Australian probably, but in Israel, you go, "Yeah, take this sub network and just try it out," and they actually find stuff that way, amazingly. But you shouldn't feel, I think, so bad about the defensive capabilities in Australia.
It seems like you are concerned about personal privacy. I'm concerned more about that everything is going to be on the cloud. I'm talking about huge enterprise, and this is a fashion that no one can stop. Even if you don't need to be in the cloud, you are going to be in the cloud because this is the movement that everyone is pushing. And thinking about watering company, electrical company, all the utilities being on the cloud, we are going to lose our privacy.
All right, guys, well, we're out of time, so please give a rounding applause for our panelists.